There's the C.S. Lewis conversation. He talks about his friendships with two other guys, J.R. Tolkien and Charles Williams. The three of them were best friends, and Charles Williams dies, and C.S. Lewis thought, well, now it'll give J.R. Tolkien and I more chance to become better friends and get deeper. But what he realized was that with the loss of Charles Williams, that when Charles Williams was in the room, J.R. Tolkien had a different facet that was illuminated, and it was gone. And the point is that friendships bring out facets of you, and different friends bring out different facets. And so the whole of a person can't be brought out by themselves or by one person. And the whole of a person is brought out by community.
I mean...
2 adjectives to describe Nate.
Man, I don't know. Let me think about that.
Let me think on that. Let's hear on that one.
Goodness, there's so many to narrow it down to 2.
The number one adjective I would use to describe Nate would be like fierce.
He's just a guy that's going to get something done.
Competitive. I'm sure that's not the first time you've heard that. Very competitive.
Dedicated.
Determined. And I think he always kind of was. If he wanted to do something, he could become pretty mono-focused and determined.
Great is, I would say, the very first and really the only adjective.
He's passionate.
Hyper competitive.
I think he's really funny.
Curious.
He's driven and curious. Really.
I would say driven.
Driven.
He is a driven guy.
I mean, it's like hardworking or grit.
Determined.
He is very determined.
He's a natural leader. He's a natural. There's very few people who have that capability.
The first one that came to mind was empathetic.
When something happens to you, he's one of the first people that would reach out to, make sure you're okay or congratulate you or whatever it may be.
Funny, which was a big, I don't know the right word. I don't want to say turn on, but like that's a big attraction to me.
It's a good balance of, cool, laid back, but extremely driven at the same time, and that's what makes Nathan so well-rounded.
He also is a freak athlete.
He falls in that category of individual that's just extreme.
It's so cliche, but like old people have wisdom. On their deathbed, they're not worrying about how much, they've worked during their lives. They worry about the important things. I just remember spinning, and then I just collapsed. Woke up a day later in the hospital with a breathing tube down my throat, and that's when we found out it was cancerous and fast growing.
He was just such an easy child overall.
He was easy. Easy to raise, easy to be around, just easy.
He walked early. He rode a bike. I think he was maybe 4. And we were like, you can't. He said he wanted the training wheels off. We're like, no way, you're going to kill yourself. But rode it like the first time down the sidewalk.
we had a really good, always had a good relationship. We never fought. We got along really well. But he was like my baby, I guess, and would do anything I told him. So like our whole lives, like I've always been the boss of Nathan.
She was like Angelica from Rugrats. She was telling everybody what to do, and especially Nathan. So the majority of the time, they were doing what Hannah wanted to do, and that might be a production of Cats in the bonus room with leotards on and whatever. He just did what she said. I remember one day he was coming down the stairs in a bridal gown and a veil because Hannah decided he was getting married as a girl, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, but so it was a lot of whatever Hannah said, and he didn't never buck the system with her. Like, he didn't ever say, no, I'm not doing that. He would just go, okay. I don't know if she just had that power over him to control him. And there never has really come a day when that shifted. She still can just say, Nathan, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, okay.
First met Nathan was Miss Hall's class, 3rd grade. Everybody's kind of shy, everybody's kind of awkward, everybody's, figuring out, what's going on. And he was the guy that would walk up to you and talk to you.
I moved here in 7th grade, and we went to the same middle school. He was one of the first guys to actually kind of get to know me and hang out with me at school. I was a new student from out of town.
So the first time that I met Nathan was probably, it was in middle school. He kind of was the ringleader of anything we did in middle school and then in high school.
So Nathan was always very much the nucleus of anything that was going on. When we got out of school on Friday, a lot of people would just go straight to his house because that's where you go, Whatever he was doing, that's kind of where you wanted to be. People just liked being around him. He had no enemies, really, ever.
I mean, his friends were just at the house all the time. I mean, and that's starting young all the way into high school. I mean, we always had a huge set of kids at the house, especially, a bunch of boys.
Either our sophomore or junior year, Nathan ran track because our track coach, Coach Prince, told him that he'd get him out of a speeding ticket if he ran track. So Nathan was actually surprisingly really, really athletic. I mean, I knew he was good at everything, literally everything, but I didn't know he was such a great runner. I always thought Nathan should go on that show Minute to Win It, because he's just, you take like a penny or something, you want to throw it in a bottle, like he'll just try until he gets it, and he was like that with pretty much everything he did.
Honestly, we all knew he was the smartest one.
He was the guy that you just hated in class because he didn't study really hard, and it was the night before the test, and he would kind of glance at some of the stuff, and then he'd come in and make an A. He
slept a lot in class, and you'd think, what is this kid slacking? He'd already done the homework for the next week. He was just, and then he just wanted to chill out. So he was kind of that quiet, subtle, brilliant mind that you wouldn't expect, but you just look at his work and his track record, literally, and he was just an exceptional guy, in the classroom and, on the field, wherever, really. Nathan's been through a lot, his parents were divorced, and it was ugly, and, that was during a very, formative time for Nathan, and, and he was, probably pretty low still at the point in college when he met Elizabeth.
All of my friends were in Rush, and I had the day off because we had to switch out days. And so Alex and Larkin called and asked if I wanted to come hang out. And so Nathan and Larkin came and picked me up from my dorm. And that Shakira song, that Hips Don't Lie song, was on. And Nathan was singing and dancing. And I'd never met him before in the car. And I was in the back seat thinking, this guy's so crazy, but he was funny. Then later on that week, there was a party. And so we met again at the party, and we talked all night, and he asked for my number, and I gave it to him, and he told me that he would call me the next day after his flag football game, and he never called. And I was like, I should not have given this guy my number. I don't know, I don't really know him. And
he was playing, I guess, intramural football at UT, and had a pretty bad concussion and went to the hospital and didn't call. And so Elizabeth was like, well, you know, I guess it's just one of those, you know, guys. He got my phone number. He said he was going to call and didn't call.
I had come home from a trip to see about him because he had had this, you know, this concussion, and we were sitting there, and he was repeating over and over the same questions. It was scary because he had no short-term memory. And so he'd say, okay, so I was wakeboarding, and we're like, no, you were playing football. And this is what happened. You went out for a pass, and so did such and so, and you hit your head, and we'd tell the whole story, and then he'd go, oh, okay. And he'd get his phone out and he'd look at it and he'd go, so I was wakeboarding?
I mean, he was obviously making like no sense whatsoever, but he kept being like, where's Fogo? Where's Fogo? I need to talk to Fogo. And I was like, what the hell is a Fogo? Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
It turns out that was Elizabeth. Her last name is Fogo.
And he said, I'm going to call her. And I was like, oh, this is not a good idea. I said, Nathan, you might want to wait till tomorrow to call her. He goes, no, I'm going to call her. And so I'm listening, you know, like eavesdropping in the conversation because he just had this horrible injury. So he's calling her and I'm like listening.
I was in bed and I answered and it sounded like he was reading from a card. And he was like, hey, I'm sorry I haven't called. I had a concussion and, you know, I had a concussion playing flag football and I had to be taken to the hospital. And
it was a short conversation. He hangs up. And then about 5 minutes later, he goes, I think I'm going to call Fogo. And I was like, oh, you just called her? And he goes, no, I didn't. And I'm like, yeah, you really seriously just called her.
He called back 30 seconds later.
I said, would you mind if I talked to her? And he was like, Mom, that's weird. And I'm like, just let me talk to her for a second. So he goes, my mom wants to talk to you.
So I was lying down in my dorm room in my bed. And then since Nathan called me a second time, his mom got on the phone and was like, hey, Elizabeth, this is Nathan's mom. And I like shot up out of bed and I was like, hey, Mrs. Sexton, like trying to be, you know, like talking to his mom.
Hi, Mrs. Sexton. She was totally freaked out that it was me. But I said, you just need to know Nathan had a head injury. He's had a concussion playing intramural football.
Anyway, that's the first time I talked to my future mother-in-law. It kind of went from there. And we just started dating after that.
He had called me and said, man, I love this girl already. You know, when he's kind of got his mind set.
I mean, I felt like they were pretty serious sophomore year. I mean, when they were dating sophomore year of college, I thought they're going to get married.
We graduated in 2009, end of 2009, into a terrible financial crisis. And he got this job at HP and he told me about it. And he was like, yeah, I'm moving to Arkansas.
So I remember taking him over there and getting him all set up. It was just like, see ya. And I mean, he was all by himself, you know, never been like in a spot where I know no one. And I'm in a call center and I don't even hardly know how to get around town.
I think he was really depressed being out there and away from everybody in such a shithole place.
And he was miserable. And it was a really bad day when I'm talking to him and he goes, well, I quit my job and I'm moving in with Elizabeth's parents. And I was like, what? Nathan, you're making fantastic money. He said, Mom, I'm miserable. And I'm like, well, could we have like talked about this first maybe? And so, you know, you quit your job, you have no other job, so you're not going from one to the next, and you're moving in with your girlfriend's parents? I was like, I don't know about this.
We were on vacation with Buddy's, my husband's family, in Daytona Beach, and I had mentioned to Nathan that if he, because he had mentioned that he might want to move to Chattanooga to be closer, to be in the same town with Elizabeth, that he was just miserable in Little Rock. And so I said, well, you're welcome to stay with us until you can get on your feet. And so we were in Daytona and he called me and he said, when you made that offer, were you serious? And I said, absolutely, yeah. He goes, okay, I'm going to do it. And I said, okay, that's fine. And he said, is this weekend okay? And I was kind of surprised and I said, sure, yeah, that's fine. And I told him when we would be back. When we got back from Daytona, he was already in Chattanooga. So he was very serious. He came and lived with us for a little while with no job, had not found a job yet. Came and moved in pretty quickly, found a job, and worked and saved money. And then when he did move out, we were trying to convince him not to. We were just to stay with us. We love having you here, but he had plans.
What he was really saying is, I don't want to lose this girl, because the job out there had begun stressing him out with his relationship with Elizabeth. And he put her first, and he didn't put money first. And he put her so first that he thought, I'm going to leave this job and I'm going to go for the girl. And I loved that he did that, even though at the time it threw me, because I thought, what, you have a great job, you know, you're set. But that's the way Americans think. You know, it's like you've got to have the right paycheck before you can get, and it was kind of all reversed and kind of weird, but it was good.
So we were walking down to the beach for us to go take pictures, and randomly Nathan just like got on one knee and proposed. And I think he said that he had this big long speech, you know, prepared, but all he said to me was, "Will you marry me?"
I can still remember we're driving over Mont Eagle and she was like, well, Nathan and I are expecting, and you know, I flipped out. She was the first of our friends to have a baby, so we were just so excited. I mean, Nathan's a hard worker, obviously, and he was hardworking here. I just don't think that he was as passionate about this.
I guess he just never like really found his passion in any of it. And then I had a conversation one day with my mom, and she was like, you know, Nathan is just really unhappy, and he wants like a job that's just like, at least where he feels like he's giving back to people or able to give back to people.
Now, I want to do something else. I want to do something that, you know, I have a hand in, like, creating.
You know, I mean, the thing about Nathan is he kind of walks to the rhythm of his own drum. You know, he doesn't, the corporate world was never really going to work for someone like him. He's too creative, he's too smart and innovative.
I'll never forget, he was working for a financial planner in town. And he was, you know, kind of doing the corporate thing. He wanted career advice. We just went to lunch and he was like, hey, I'm kind of miserable where I'm at. And I was like, man, you know, you're the type of person that no one's going to push you harder than you can push yourself. And so at that time, I really kind of encouraged him to talk with the bellhops.
So I met Nate a few times. He was working about 2 blocks from us. We were at Lamppost, had just moved to Chattanooga to start the company. And Nathan was friends with a few other guys that we worked with.
We need to get Nathan on our team. And purely on the fact that he was just this really sharp, bright guy, but really curious. And you could tell he was just the type of person that you would want to be around a lot. So, and that's how, you know, a lot of startups are in the beginning. You just want to surround yourself with people that you want to be around because you're just doing it all the time.
One day he just called and said, you know, I'm considering this startup company. And he started telling me about it. And he said it'd be a pay cut.
You know, well, Nathan, I mean, you've got a steady job, you've got a, you know, an okay income, you've got some, you know, a health plan, and here's this young startup. And I'm not saying it can't be great, but it's also, you understand, you're kind of leaving what may feel like security to take a risk, and it will be a risk, but there could be great benefits from it too. And he was just like, nope, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do.
He pulled the trigger, and like the rest was history. I mean, you know, 12 months later, he had like a 60-person team and was loved by everyone, and was just really a great leader, super curious guy, and kind of magnetic.
Every morning he'd be there at like, you know, he'd always beat me in. He'd be there at 6:15. He would have, you know, like a big thing of energy bars, and, you know, basically just like work through lunch, work through dinner.
Nathan, on top of having the most stressful job in the company and having a newborn child, taught himself to program at night after work, after his family went to bed. So he would stay up from like 9 to 2 a.m. every night and just teach himself to write software, so he didn't have to wait on request from putting a request in with the engineering team to fix something within his day-to-day.
What started as an app to help students get summer college jobs while studying at Auburn has now turned into a nationwide million-dollar company in downtown Chattanooga.
Bellhops has a presence in 43 states. Back then, 3 employees. Now it's close to 120.
As the company continued to scale, they just kind of continued to promote. And like next thing you know, he's like running the whole company, right?
You know, what was happening was that Nathan was coming into himself. I mean, I feel like his qualities that he's always had got funneled into a place that they were being utilized with great intensity.
He found like the perfect job for him to really just, you know, kind of thrive in.
I wish I could have one, if not, you know, 10 of Nathan's at Ambition, and you know, what a one, the one that Bellhops had. And
Nathan wasn't the type of leader that says like, hey, go do this, go do that. I mean, Nathan was leading by example. You know, he was taking phone calls, like he was taking tough phone calls.
He feels responsible for everything that could possibly be affected or touched by him.
It was clear that it wasn't just a job for him. Like, he would talk about things like we were at war, right? It's like he'd come in and he would just be really mad and really upset. And it was because he didn't view it as a job, it was his life, right? He identified with what they were doing, and he was very hard to deal with. You know, not because he was lazy or like wasn't a team player or wasn't thinking about things correctly. He was hard to deal with because the problems he was dealing with were hard, and he knew that unless he was extremely vocal about what we needed to fix, that it wasn't going to get done.
You know, like, I saw him get mad a couple times, and it was because we weren't doing the things he believed we can do. You know, we were not taking it seriously, or we were not at our full potential.
You know, he'd be like, yeah, Elizabeth is mad, like it's my 8th day in a row coming home after like 7, but he was in it.
He was capable of so much, he would just take things on. And yeah, I do remember asking, like, is there anything I can do to help? You look exhausted. Like, you are just busting it right now.
And we realized he hadn't had a day off in like 6 weeks. I'm talking 7 days a week, you know, 14 hours a day. And he'd kind of gone mad, which any normal human would have not even been able to make it that long. But he came in and he was just saying these things. And we're just like, Nathan, I think you need to just go home, man. Like, just go home and just shut down for like 2 or 3 days.
I mean, family was not like priority, or at least didn't seem like it. And that made me really sad, because I was like, he's missing, like, I felt like the first 2 years are huge in a kid's life. I mean, from going to newborn to like walking and talking, just so many changes, and I felt like he was missing them.
So it was the first day that we moved into our new office, and which was a really big day in the company.
I was taking my like team out to lunch, stood up, and you know, I just remember spinning.
Pretty quickly we realized like he just, like his eyes were stuck and he was just spinning. And so me and Amber like raced over there to, you know, try to catch him as he fell.
He was seizing on the ground, and I put his head in my lap because he was hitting his head on the ground. And then he kind of stopped, but he was like completely out of it. Like, his eyes were there, but he wasn't there.
I pull up to Bellhops and Warehouse Row into the breezeway, and I see them pulling Nathan out on the gurney, and he was all strapped in, and he was having his 3rd seizure. And I've never seen anybody have a seizure, let alone your husband, and so it was really, I mean, it's like ingrained in my mind, and it's a haunting image.
Seeing that happen is awful, right? And weird, and you know, it kind of rocks your foundation, and you just kind of start to question, like, and what does this all mean? Is it worth it? What are we doing? Why are we so obsessed? Why don't we spend more time smelling the flowers, right? But to see it happen to a guy that was perceived as unstoppable was what impacted everyone the most, right? Because Nathan is a guy that controlled everything, and he was extremely effective. To see someone like hobbled like that with that perception that you have of him it makes it even more difficult to like conceive. So seeing anyone having a seizure being wheeled out of the office is hard, but seeing him, you almost can't believe it, and then you can't even really talk about it or express how it made you feel for a few days.
Seeing somebody that you thought was completely unbreakable, I don't know, it's scary.
A few of us jumped in a car and went to the emergency room and back into a room where we walk in and open up the curtains, and Nathan's wife Elizabeth is standing there, and there Nathan is on this hospital bed with, you know, one of those like blouses on and has a trach in, and like looking down on, you know, on that, like this like physical specimen, you know, reduced to like having a machine breathing for him was it was like you're looking down on like a superhero that had like been stuck with like kryptonite or something, you know.
Suddenly you're seeing all the tubes and all the wires and all the machines, and he was in a really tough spot. And then, you know, here's poor Elizabeth standing at his side, and that was really scary to see all that.
The doctor called me back and told me that they had done a CT scan on him, and he told me to sit down, which I was kind of starting to get panicky, and I was the only one back there with Nathan at this point. Nathan was unconscious, you know, in the ER. And so he sat me down in the hallway and told me that they had found a large mass on Nathan's brain. And it didn't really sink in with me. I mean, I felt like my hearing just kind of vanished. Like it was just, that's all. I mean, I can't even explain it. It was just an out of body experience. Like I just didn't, I couldn't believe that that's what this was.
I remember her telling me with kind of a state of shock on her face, and I'm sorry I get emotional telling this a little bit, but she said they say he has a mass on his brain, or in his brain, and I just hugged her. I said, "Oh, Elizabeth, you've got to be, you can't be serious." And she said, "Yeah."
It was just really, I mean, just a really crazy, bizarre, sad day.
It was the perfect representation of that worst case scenario that you never saw coming. And it makes you kind of turn inwards and realize, like, you know, none of us are really in control.
Is it benign? I mean, can you tell? And you know, of course, the doctor was being careful to not say a whole lot.
We were at his dad's house, and we were waiting for that call from Dr. Thompson, and I was just a nervous wreck, because I remember Gretchen, we were sitting on the couch, and she was like, why are you so nervous? Like, what could be the worst that could happen? And I was like, well, I'm really afraid that it's going to be a grade 4 glioblastoma. And she was like, why do you think that? And I said, I don't know. My granddad passed away from glioblastoma. And so I pretty much hate that word.
We were waiting all day on this phone call. Finally it came, and we put him on speakerphone, and it was Elizabeth and Nathan and I. We were the only three that were there. And we sat in the living room on the floor and we put the phone in between us. It was like a campfire. We just sat and listened to what he said. The doctor was driving to camp to pick up his son or something. And he told us that it was glioblastoma.
It was stage 4 glioblastoma. And that's when I just started crying. I knew this was really, really serious and really, really, really bad. And I think that's kind of when it all hit Nathan too.
He sat there for a minute, and then he said, "We should have gone to Paris." Aunt Elizabeth had studied French for years and always wanted to go to Paris. I think it says, a lot about him, that his first concern wasn't really himself, it was Elizabeth, which is pretty magnanimous. I think eventually after a few minutes, he just wanted to be alone. And I think he went out on the back porch and I think he cried.
It was one of the hardest I've ever seen him cry.
Everything just came crashing down, that I just kind of, I don't know. I mean, I was just sad and scared, and I didn't know what to do. Just really, really scared for Nathan and for our family and for everybody.
I went through like one day where I was just screaming and crying and just like in total disbelief, and really like crying out to God, like, why? Like, you're not going to take my only brother. I'm not going to have that happen. And then I got to the point where I was like, I can't grieve Nathan while he's still here. He doesn't deserve that, and there's no guarantees of what's happening to him, and I just want to like enjoy the time with him. And I think I just realized it was really a choice, like how I decided to think about life and think about Nathan.
When you're delivered a diagnosis like this, there are choices. I mean, you can roll over and just die. And as we know, with Nathan's personality type, that ain't him.
Let's get back on our feet. Let's fight this thing.
And so went through chemo and then radiation, and he's just getting hammered with this stuff. I mean, like poisoning his body, and like his hair is falling out, and he still just has this like intense attitude.
These are trials, they're experiments. We don't know what works. They're trying to figure out what works, but obviously what the standard stuff would be didn't work, so now you're out here.
Wait a minute, he's running? Like, is that healthy or safe? And then, of course, like, the half isn't enough, and full is enough, and now he's doing ultras, and like, what's funny is I don't think anybody's shocked.
There isn't anything past ultra marathons, like, so that's just what he gravitated towards.
My wife worries to death, and most other people think I'm crazy.
I don't know. I probably give him a hard time because I get a little nervous about him running such long distances. I just don't want him to be too hard on his body. But he doesn't listen to me. He just goes in one ear and out the other.
He's just a machine. Like that if there's anybody who could do that, it'd be him, which is crazy too because of the treatment that he's going under. Like anytime I'm running and I feel like I'm like something hurts, I'm like, you need to buck up. Like this is nothing.
Really, if we run together, we're kind of running on our own because he's 10 miles ahead, you know.
He is so much faster than me. It's ridiculous. So we ride to the trailhead together, we'll run a few miles together, and then he just takes off. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, he's standing in the parking lot for 40 minutes waiting on me to get back.
The fact that my own son, even if he's perfectly healthy, got out here and ran 30 miles, I'm like, that's incredible. And then you're just thinking, and oh, by the way, he has brain cancer.
It's been amazing to watch Elizabeth, you know, care for their son, care for Nathan, maintain some sort of normalcy. But I think in all past newspaper articles or you know, anything that the media has produced, she has been not represented well enough. So I think that's missing.
Elizabeth's not one to wallow in self-pity and to think, why did this happen to me? I guess she just took it as, you know, well, this happened to Nathan and to me and our little family, and now we're going to get busy with taking care of it and doing what we have to just deal with this.
She just got a journal and started taking notes and, you know, was taking control of Nathan. So when there was times that there would be 30 or 40 people in our home and she could see just something slightly change in him or that it was overwhelming, she just stood up and took control and she would say, Nathan, let's go upstairs. She could read him before he even knew what he needed. I would say she still does.
You don't know really what's in somebody till they get squeezed. And this Elizabeth has been unbelievable. I mean, for the sweet little college sorority girl that you're thinking, gosh, you know, maybe hasn't dealt with a lot, she has been a rock star in this situation. She's steady as a rock. She takes care of a million things that she shouldn't have to take care of, drives Nathan everywhere, never complains.
I say to her all the time, just because I can see how strong she is, that it's gonna be okay. You know, it's gonna work out. Like, this is, you know, I can't even imagine what they're going through, but just the strength that she has through her faith and through her family and through her friends, that she and Jack are gonna be okay. And I hope that it's with Nathan. But I just know that she's strong and she's had to dig down really deep and that she's gonna be fine.
I was telling everybody that it was like my mantra, you know, like when I'm struggling running, and like I just say that over and over to myself, just because it's like something, you know, easy to say.
How he's taken that prognosis and consciously or subconsciously utilized it to spread so much hope, to inspire so many people, to touch people's lives even just for an instant and inspire them to, you know, whether it's push themselves harder or love the people around them closer, or, you know, go out and communicate with the people you love with now and just tell them something. Like, it's impossible to measure how much that, you know, has changed people's lives.
Whether it's 2 years or 20 years or whatever, he's deciding for himself how he wants to live the rest of his life. I think most of us would just say, okay, well, you know, it is what it is, this is what I've got, I'm just gonna sit around and wait for it to be over. And Nathan isn't doing that. He's making it a positive in his life, and he's making it a catalyst for doing more things and better things and greater things, and he's growing from it.
Could I do all that? You know, I don't think I would. You know, I think most people would probably feel really sorry for themselves. And he doesn't do that at all. I mean, he's, you know, he is continuing to be a leader.
Anybody can handle adversity, but it takes a certain type of mental strength. And I don't think Nate was born with it. I think he works really hard every day to be the person that he is and to be a good example and to be an influencer over the people in his life. It's not easy for him. It's not easy for anybody, but being able to handle adversity with grace and determination is one of the most respectable things that I've ever seen. And it's what I try to live up to every day.
You know, I've kind of looked at life in a very different light since then, and I think everyone who's heard his story can say the same.
Oh, I mean, it has, you know, changed my whole world.
It's the cliche that life is insanely short.
You really look at, you know, what happened to him, and you don't want to waste a second of a day. You know, I mean, really, when you're with people that you love, be with them, be right there and present.
Just to really live each day to the fullest, because you don't know when you're going to get that phone call that your loved one had 3 major seizures at work. You know, you never know.
And you know, perhaps in some way it's the great lesson for all of us that, you know, hit him like a sledgehammer, that, you know, our days are numbered. And of course we plan for things in the future, and you know, there's things we want to do now, but we can't, and we need to wait and all the rest. But you're not promised tomorrow. Every day has enough trouble of its own, so live in this today. And I think for Nathan, and really ever since then for me, there's been tons of times I've forgotten it, but I try to remember. We need to go to Paris. And you better live your life while you have your chance.